What about suffering and a God of love? I'm just very aware that people in different places, as Graham has already said, and I know maybe you might be on the edge of this being what you need to be thinking about, and there may be people in your mind who are really going through the middle of it at the moment. Over the last few days, weeks, I've just been meeting a number of vicars, and they've been taking funerals, and those funerals have been suicides. And there's been, I should think, 4 in the last 2 weeks, at least, over the Wirral area. Some people think, as that song in the beginning of Les Miserables, where the galley slaves are crying out to Jesus, and then they're a bit cynical because the chorus then goes on to say, "Sweet Jesus doesn't care." Some people facing the extremity of some crisis for their lives or somebody near them, they kind of cry out to God, and sometimes they kind of get a deafening silence back. I'm just going to show you a clip now from Patch Adams. Now, this is a film about a doctor who, somebody training as a doctor who kind of challenged the medical profession by actually treating his patients as human. Sorry, well, a bit of a challenge to some doctors, maybe where he was training over in America. But he was a radical, he was a bit of a clown, and he was trying to get people to, and he had some really amazing breakthroughs with some very tough patients in terms of their treatment. And he actually encourages a friend of his, a doctor, somebody who's training, to kind of come with him in this project. And in the film it's a she, in real life it was a he. And this person is killed by a schizophrenic who actually, she goes to try and follow Patch Adams's kind of philosophy and help, and ends up dead. And this is just after that, and Patch Adams is on a cliff, and he's kind of talking to God about it. So maybe we can have that clip now. That butterfly in the film is a symbol of, it's kind of it's something that the friend who died symbolized hope for her, and it takes Patch Adams into somewhere else. But that sense of God, you're not worth it, is something that maybe you can identify with. Maybe you know people who would say that's where they're at. Well, tonight isn't about some sort of exhaustive account. Now this is another bit of the technology here, which is a little PowerPoint thing here. Let's see, that comes up, but it's not. Okay, well that will come up in a minute, I'm sure. Okay. Please don't think I'm standing here to give you some exhaustive account or some proof. I believe what I'm wanting to share tonight is with the reality of the suffering, and we're not trying to pretend anything less than the awful reality of it, that God is love and God is present. Why did I show that clip from The Shawshank Redemption? There you go. Well, if you know the film, Andy Dufresne didn't commit the killing of his wife or the lover. And he's there working through this what has happened to him. And the prison is terrible. The warden that you saw there at the end is a Bible believing. He's got a Bible and he's got a text on the wall, and he's the most terrible hypocrite, and he's a corrupt and evil man, really. There is the chief warder who is a sadist, and there is a whole succession of abuse and stuff that goes on through the life of the prison. But at that moment in that clip, Andy gets the music from Mozart, The Marriage of Figaro, if you know it, and it kind of plays out. They don't understand, it doesn't matter, because it's communicating another reality in the middle of the suffering. And I think, in a sense, that's what I really want to say tonight. It's all in that clip of the film. That I believe, and Michael has kind of spoken about it as kind of working in his life, that in the middle of what it may be, alcohol, drugs, whatever the kind of suffering may be, God is not fazed by it, he is not absent from it, he is present and working, and it's a music that we are always able to tune into and always able to connect with and always able to know. That's the kind of basic thing I really want to say tonight. And you can just kind of enjoy these wonderful, comfortable seats and just sleep through the rest of just what I want to say for a few more minutes if you want to. But what do you think? Okay, Keith, well, that's a nice idea, but is that just kind of wishful thinking? You know, what about Patch Adams there on the cliff edge? Why doesn't God do something sometimes to stop it? You know, if you've lost a job, or your marriage has collapsed, or debt's overtaken you, or you've got terminal illness, or some kind of experience of abuse, or you're in the poverty trap. There are plenty of other kinds of prisons, kinds of addictions that we've heard about. Why doesn't God make it stop? How can he look on and do nothing? And then, never mind the stuff that we know is wrong, what about the tsunamis and the stuff like that that kind of takes people by surprise? There's been another film on just the other week about that. Well, all I want us to do tonight is just, this is no complete answers or anything like that, but just let's give God a chance to speak to us. And if you know the Bible at all, you'll know a guy called Job, a wealthy person who loses absolutely everything. His wife, his kids, his wealth, the whole thing disappears. And the whole of the kind of book is about Job crying out to God. Truly the thing that I fear comes upon me. And what I dread befalls me. I'm not at ease, nor am I quiet. I have no rest, but trouble comes. If you think the Bible is just a kind of patch of kind of nice-sounding kind of sound bites where we all have to do, you know, doff our cap in the presence of God, read the book of Job. It's a bit different. This is what he says too. Oh, that I knew where I might find him, that I might come even to his dwelling. I would lay my case before him and fill my mouth with arguments. See, Job refuses easy answers. He's got some friends, and sometimes in the church we can be a bit like those friends. We want to kind of make it all better too quickly. But Job won't have it. He's going to protest. He's going to be more like Patch Adams. But in the end, God speaks to him, maybe like that butterfly. Was he around when the world was created? And what kind of world does he want to live in? Next week we'll think a bit about creation and why that matters and how it goes alongside science. And that's really important for a lot of people, particularly some of the young people in our schools. Maybe you know somebody, maybe that cry, you know what it is to cry, or you wish you could cry out to God like that. Well, the Bible can handle our questions. The Bible can handle our anger. God can handle this stuff when we cry out from that place of suffering and questions. Now, I'm really glad that we're in New Brighton. And I love this cinema, and I think there's some great things going on up here. At the beginning of last year, I went just along to the Floral Pavilions to an event which a little bit bigger than this. There are about 600 seats in the theatre there. And there were kids from virtually all the sixth forms from the Wirral schools. It was Holocaust Memorial Day. And this guy who's pictured there, Reddy Oppenheimer, was speaking. He was 82 years of age, and meeting him was just one of the high points of my time as Bishop of Birkenhead. He was 12 years of age as a young kid from Holland, and his parents and his brother and he were arrested. They were Jewish, of course. And from July 1944 to April 1945, he managed to survive Belsen concentration camp. His grandparents went to the gas chambers, and he spoke to, as I say, 600-700 young people for an hour you could have heard a pin drop. And then there were some question and answers, and one of the kids from the back says, "Do you believe in God?" He hadn't been brought up, though he was Jewish, he hadn't been brought up as a religious Jew. And I'll never forget what Rudy said, straight back. He said, "Yes, I do believe, but don't ask me why." How can you explain such evil? Well, we can't in a way, but actually it's okay if we want to ask why. Maybe especially now when we're not terrorized by a fascist government. And if we go back to the Bible and to Job and the question and the complaint, we see it in the Bible, and in a way this is partly why I also want us to maybe think about these things tonight and bring some friends along who might be kind of, gave up on the Bible, gave up on the church a long time ago, and have just completely written it off as having anything relevant to say to their lives in the 21st century. And I want to say, look again, friend, look again. There's more. And we find that the Bible isn't kind of interested in knockdown arguments like on the playground, That's not the way in which God speaks to us. What we find is the Bible describing this amazing world as good. And that goodness coming from God, like that music we heard in the Shawshank Redemption, God playing that music out in the creation of the world, and the seas, and the land, and the animals, and people, men and women, made, it says, in his image. But what it says is, from the goodness that we have been given, something came into that which kind of messed it up. And essentially it speaks of it like this. When we try and decide for ourselves, me, myself, you, yourself, we think we know best in terms of what good is all about. My good trumps yours. And we just exclude God from the picture. It's amazing how quickly stuff starts to go bad on us. And what it says is that evil has come in and it has spread like a plant and it's gone everywhere, including into our own natures. So I don't want to cause suffering any more than you do, but I find that I do. I want to love people, don't I? But sometimes I find that I hate them. I want to be fair. I certainly want people to be fair with me, but I know that sometimes I behave unfairly. I want to think about others, but actually I want to put myself first or get myself seen in a good light. And so on and so on. And stuff happens and it breaks down the goodness of how we are supposed to be with each other and with God. There's a famous German philosopher called Nietzsche, who at the end of the 19th century proclaimed that God was dead. And then he went on to say that everything was permitted. Nietzsche was one of Hitler's famous philosophers and legitimated the idea of a Nazi concentration camp, because everything is permitted. Because I want to say, in the face of that, and the question, why doesn't God do something about it? The other part of the Bible is that God has done something about it. It is true, we are not robots. In a prison, in the Shawshank or Patch Adams, if we want everything to kind of work out, I mean, I could have shown something from the quite funny film Bruce Almighty, where, he's allowed to be God for a while, if you know, and he thinks the great idea of dealing with the voluminous prayer requests that come down on his computer is just to say yes to everybody, and the result is total chaos. Remember seeing that? That's what happens if we just do it all our own way. But if we're going to give and receive love, if we're going to know freedom, then we need to realize that God has made us with that freedom. And that means there will be fractures and there will be things that go wrong. But if you go back to the scriptures, and we'll look at a bit more of it next week, not so much tonight, we see that God from the very beginning has come to be with us, to bring us back into the way that he meant us to be and he wants us to be. And from Genesis, if you know the story, or the story of Exodus, or God is coming to people who are in oppression and suffering and bringing deliverance, or to use the word from our first film, redemption, bringing us back. And okay, we're going to think about Jesus in a couple of weeks' time more, but just this is something that came from 1 Peter, from Peter, one of Jesus' disciples. Just see what that says as God coming among us, God experiencing suffering. They hurled insults at him, he didn't retaliate. He suffered, he made no threats. He entrusted himself to him who judges justly. We'll be thinking about that in a few weeks as well. He bore our sins in his body on the tree, that is the cross, that we might die to sin, live for righteousness. That goes through the transformation that Michael was talking about. By his wounds you have been healed. You were like sheep going astray, but you returned to the shepherd or overseer or bishop of your souls. Now, some of the stuff the Bible thinks, well, I'm not sure about that. It's back in prehistory, and it's kind of, what's the origin of it and all that. But there's no question about the historical reality of Jesus. Even if you don't believe in him, you can't deny his reality. And his cross. And what he came to do, which is to make it impossible for anyone to say, God doesn't care, or God isn't with us. God has come in a way that was infinitely costly to himself, and through the experience of suffering, to be with us in suffering, and to take us through into the way of life which will bring an end to suffering. Now, that's what I really want to say about that tonight, in a way. And I don't know whether you find that convincing or how you react to it. And we're not going to do... I got asked on the radio this morning whether we do a question and answer. It's not an easy thing to do so much in a cinema like this, but I'm certainly going to be around, and there are some people with blue badges around, and there's a great cafe down there, so there's plenty of time for us to talk some more about this if you want to do that, and that's absolutely fine. But if you're still thinking, I don't know about this God thing. If there is no God, if there is no love, no possibility of relationship, not even anyone to complain to, like Patch Adams on the edge of the cliff. There's no music playing in the middle of the suffering and the corruption. What are we going to do in the face of suffering? Why do we even feel that it's wrong if we're just kind of chemical reactions and here by chance? Why does it even bother us when we see a child starving? Or people in concentration camps? Or people being shoved out of their homes because they can't pay the mortgage and they've got no more money? I don't know about you, but when one of the vivid images of of a year or so ago was when, you remember Fabrice Muamba, that football was collapsed on the football pitch, and the kind of great secular kind of football stadium turned into a prayer meeting. Because everyone's heart went out to that man. Nobody knew how bad he was. But there were people who didn't know him praying, and they probably never prayed before either, or not for a while. That's the way we're wired up to be. Why do we do any of that if we're just survival of the fittest? Yes, we can argue with God. But you argue with a real person, not a figment of your imagination. And in Jesus we see God's response. Jesus, who himself gets angry with human suffering, but goes to the very heart of its reality in us and changes us, as Michael has told us already tonight. Now, I don't know what your experience has been, but I just want to just finish by saying I have experienced those Job moments. When I was first ordained, way back in the 1980s in Birmingham, I had the extraordinary privilege of being the chaplain of the Children's Hospital in Birmingham. And I tell you, it was a moment, I was still a relatively young guy, I suppose, at that time, and meeting people's anger and questions and being with parents as their children were dying. I couldn't have been in there if I didn't know that what that verse, those verses behind me said were true, and that Jesus had been in that place. After I moved on to be vicar of Aston and got married and had our first children, my sister-in-law, her second child, became very ill, just newly born. And so we went back to the Children's Hospital again. This time not as a chaplain, but just as a relative. And little Bear Wynn, that was his name, they were Welsh, he died after 9 weeks. And it was a terrible time. And they asked me to take his funeral. And I used those verses that we had just a moment or two ago from Job, that which I feared has come upon me. But because of Jesus Christ going right down into the depths of death and being raised to life, and again we'll think about these things over these next few weeks, I believe there is a future, I believe there is a hope, I believe there is more. God meeting us, God coming to take us through. And that was certainly our experience way back then. And I could say much more about that, obviously, but I'm not going to now. But just so that you know a little bit, I suppose, just, you know, having lived through that and had to face this and just proved God's presence. Not giving us all easy answers, promising a way through. And Jesus says to me that even death is not the end of the story. His greatest moment of suffering is when he cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me? But that psalm from the Bible that Jesus quotes on the cross finishes off, he didn't hide his face from me, but heard when I cried to him. And I believe Jesus knew the truth of those words. And especially as he shared those words when he rose from the dead. So that's really all I want to say tonight. I want to open up, as that Shawshank Redemption clip started at the beginning. There is the music of God's love and presence made real to us in history in Jesus. And now, as Michael has shared, we can know that forgiveness, that presence of Jesus Christ in our lives. And it may be tonight is much too soon for you to be thinking of praying something, but if you did want to say a prayer with Michael or me or somebody where you can see one of the blue badges who's hoping, then that's absolutely fine. Please do that. If you want to ask questions, if you want to challenge, if you want to use, and I think Graham's going to come in a moment, we've got that little response card because we want to try and get a sense of what people are thinking and responding, and how we in the churches can help go on from here. That's it. Thank you very much for coming tonight. And I hope you'll come and spend these next Sunday nights and bring others and let other people know. And I hope it's been a good experience tonight for you being here. And we're kind of open to what kind of God is going to do in Wallasey and New Brighton through this amazing experience of being able to come to the Light Cinema. I'm going to hand up back to Graham. I'm around